All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight. This is the Hatchie-Loosahatchie Mississippi River Ecosystem Restoration Study public scoping meeting. My name is Mike Throne. I'm the project biologist from the Corps of Engineers and the National Environmental Policy Act coordinator for the project. We want to thank Mr. James Wilkinson and the Meeman Shelby Forest State Park for allowing us to hold this scoping meeting here today. And I was going to turn it over to him to say a few words about the park.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Again, I'm James Wilkinson. I'm the park manager here at Meeman Shelby Forest State Park, which, you know, it is a great state park in what all we offer. We're 12,539 acres. And like I said, we offer a lot of vast opportunities for recreation, hunting, and other things, and boating.
Thanks, James. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Ed Lambert. He's one of our senior leaders there at Memphis District Corps of Engineers. Ed?
Good evening. My name is Edward Lambert. I'm Chief of the Environmental Compliance Branch for the Corps of Engineers in Memphis. And welcome to the scoping meeting. Public scoping is an important component of our public involvement program for our studies. And I want to welcome y'all here tonight. We have a couple of presentations lined up to provide you more background and also talk about some of the measures that have been developed. We had an initial scoping meeting back in October. It was a virtual meeting, and since then the team has been busy formulating potential measures. And we had a scoping meeting this past Monday on the 19th. We have another scoping meeting planned for October 3 in Marion, Arkansas. And welcome tonight, and we appreciate your participation in the scoping meeting. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Jason Henniker. Jason is the chairman of the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee, the non-federal cost-sharing partner on the study.
Thank you, Ed. Like you said, my name's Jason Henniger. I'm the Assistant Chief of Fisheries for Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency and the current Executive Chair for Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. This feasibility study is the next chapter in a long history of management on the Lower Mississippi River between the Corps of Engineers and the LMRCC. Now I'll turn it over to Angie Rogers, our LMRCC coordinator, tell you a little more about the history and what the work that has been done on the Lower River.
Thanks, Jason. As he said, my name is Angie Rogers. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but I'm the coordinator for the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. And as Jason said, this is really just another step in a process that the LMRCC has been going through since 1994, since the organization was formed. So I wanted to take a few minutes just to give you a little bit of background about the LMRCC, explain who we are, and then talk about some of the work that we've been doing over the last 10, 15 years, and then kind of how we got to the place where we are today with this particular Hatchie-Loosahatchie study. So the LMRCC is a coalition of the 6 states on the Lower Mississippi River. It is comprised of a 12-member executive committee or board, and each of those 6 states on the Lower River has a rep from their Fish and Wildlife Agency and also from their Environmental Quality Agency. So we kind of have the Fish and Wildlife perspective represented in addition to water quality. We were formed in 1994, modeled loosely after the Upper Mississippi River Conservation Committee, but with the difference being that we do have that water quality component to our organization. And we were incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're really excited to be partnering on this study with the Corps of Engineers. And you know, again, we were established in '94, and really The reason that we were established is because all of these states recognize lower Mississippi River is a big place, and you can't manage it all by yourself as an individual state agency or an individual state. So it's been a really great partnership. And we couldn't do the work that we do without a lot of cooperating partners, the Corps of Engineers being one of those primary ones, certainly Fish and Wildlife Service, the Nature Conservancy, Mississippi River Trust, and many others have been great partners to us through the years. I want to bring this to your attention, and then I'm gonna go away from it, but I'm going to ask you to remember it because I'll come back to it. But this is a really important piece of legislation that came out in Water Resources Development Act of 2000, and it basically authorized a study of the entire lower Mississippi River, and it was allowing us to look at 3 different pieces. It was an assessment of information needed for river-related management. It was an assessment of natural resource and habitat needs, and also an assessment of recreation needs and access along the river. And so this authorization really was designed to kind of set the stage for how we could look at the river comprehensively, get kind of that general idea of what those needs were, and then provide recommendations for starting to address those. So I'm kind of going through a little bit of a timeline here, and so I'm not going to mention this for a few more slides, but it's really important. So this was in 2000. The LMRCC, once it got going and established a constitution and bylaws and all of that fun, we needed to kind of decide what direction the organization was going to go in. And we worked to hold state-level planning meetings in the early 2000s and put together what we've coined our Restoring America's Greatest River Plan. This was formalized in 2004. We did a revision of it in 2015. And it's all located on our website, online. There are these maps that you can see, examples here from Arkansas and Tennessee, that list all of these potential projects that were identified during those state-level planning meetings. And these were identified by various partners, folks that were very familiar with the river, that had on-the-ground knowledge of what those needs were. And we basically compiled all of this information into this plan, and this has kind of been our guiding document. The types of projects that were identified, you can see here, there was a pretty big list of them, 239 total projects in a variety of categories. But if you look at that top category of restoring secondary channels, we had a large number of those that were identified as needs. And so this is really where the LMRCC decided that we could start making an impact on the river. And we came up with a really unique way to do this in cooperation with the Corps of Engineers. So I'll go through a little bit of background and provide a little bit more context for what that really means. But this is Island 63 that you can see in the right corner here. This was the first notch that we worked on to open up a secondary channel. This was not the first time this work had been done on the lower river, as the Corps had been doing this work in other districts, and the Memphis district had been working on this as well, but this was the first time that we had done this in partnership with them in 2006, and we've been slowly whittling away on this when the river allows us, and been able to accomplish quite a few projects. It's a pretty simple process, but it has a big impact. And so you can see this bottom right photo, we basically use a track hoe and a bulldozer, and we're basically removing sections of the rock dikes that are placed up and down the river to restore these back channel areas. So why are we doing this? Well, this graph on the left that is from the Corps is showing you the cumulative amount of dredging that's been done through the years. So this starts in 1946 and goes through about 2012. The different shades on each of those bars are just related to various districts. So this is Memphis, Vicksburg, and New Orleans districts, which is not super important, but what is important is this overall trend that you can see. That we are up here, we have a lot of dredge material, but through time, we're having less and less dredging that's required. And that's a good thing, because dredging is extremely expensive. However, if you look on this other axis, what this black line is showing you here, this is the cumulative amount of dikes in those 3 districts on the lower river. So there's an inverse relationship here. So as the number of dikes goes up in the river, we have less dredging that's taken place. And so again, that's a good thing because dredging is so costly, but there are some implications. And so this is the schematic on the right is designed to just demonstrate what that looks like. So the yellow is our sand, and then you can see these dikes that are here. They run parallel to the flow of the river. And without those, you basically have a lot of sediment that accumulates around those dikes, because what they're designed to do is essentially push water into the navigation channel to create a self-scouring system. Again, less dredging. What we do is basically come in and just remove small sections. You can see these red circles here, where we would remove a section of that dike, remove that rock, and then it would allow flow in this secondary channel. So it allows for better connectivity between those secondary channels and the main channel. And secondary channels are really important from a variety of species. They serve as nursery areas and feeding areas for pallid sturgeon and lots of other important species. And they also serve as great recreational areas. If you've driven across the I-40 bridge at Memphis, and you look to the right when you're going into Arkansas, you can see Loosahatchie Bar, which is a phenomenal example of one of the projects that we worked on with the Memphis district back in 2008. This is that project, and so this is the I-40 bridge here. There's the pyramid and the Bass Pro Shops there, and then this complex in here is that secondary channel. And it's a great time right now to see it. I was out there a few weeks ago, and it's shining. So a lot of paddlers use that area. Really a great example project. Like I said, we completed this one in 2008. The Corps went back in several years later and put some finishing touches on some of the work, added a few more notches, and put in some other features just to help with provide that better connectivity. But this project took about 22 days for us to complete, and it opened up a little over 11 miles of secondary channel habitats. We're really, really proud of this project and wanted to keep this momentum going and look at other areas of the river where we could do similar work. This is one that we just completed last month in August, and this is at Dinsford, and this is not very far from where we're sitting right now. So we access this from the boat ramp here at Meeman Shelby Forest State Park. It's just a few miles upstream, about 4 miles upstream from here. And this is a really beautiful secondary channel that Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency brought to our attention because this area is heavily used by their commercial anglers, and they catch all three sturgeon species out of this particular chute. So pallid, shovelnose, and lake sturgeon all have been caught right here. And their commercial fisheries biologist came up to me and one of our engineers from the Memphis district at an LMRCC annual meeting and said, hey, we need some work done on this one. What can you guys do? And so engineers got together and said, well, we can see where these yellow arrows are. We're okay with putting putting notches in these particular locations. So we had one notch up here on Dike 1, and we actually put 2 notches at Dike 2 and at Dike 3. This is one we've had on the books for a few years and finally had a cooperative river this year, and we're able to complete this project. So to date, you can see the red circles in the map on the right there. These are all projects that we've completed. In addition to Dinsford, we were able to get to 3 other projects that were in the Vicksburg district this year. And so now we're up to a little over 115 miles of rehabilitated secondary channel habitat. So we're really proud of that and really excited to keep this going. All of the work that we do have several different videos that have been produced that showcase this work and give a lot more information and some great drone footage, and that can all be found on our website as well. This is another example of a type of project, not a secondary channel project, but just another example of types of projects that the LMRCC has been doing. We're very interested in connectivity, and in this particular case, this is a wildlife management area in the state of Louisiana. And we were able to go in and restore a weir that had basically failed. There's a series of 3 scar lakes here. This is the Richard K. Yancey Wildlife Management Area. And these 3 scar lakes had held water with this dilapidated weir, but then that quit working, and so we were able to come back in and replace this weir. In addition to where the stars are, we replace those culverts to allow better connectivity within the body of that wildlife management area. So this is a project that we've completed the weir last fall. We have 2 culvert replacements that have been done. We have a couple of more that'll be done this year. Then we'll be wrapping this project up. But again, just another example of the type of work that the LMRCC has been doing. Again, important habitat for our fish and wildlife resources, but also really important recreational areas as well. So, the third slide that I showed y'all talked about Lower Mississippi River Resource Assessment authorization in the year 2000. So, we're finally going to get to address that. And if you'll note, the date up here is 2012 to 2016. The moral of the story is that it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of time to work on the Lower Mississippi River. So it took us 12 years to get from an authorization to appropriations, where we actually had funding to do the work. But this was a great project, again, looking at those 3 different assessments that I mentioned earlier. And what basically came out of that was the recommendation for these 3 different programs: a data science and communications program, a habitat restoration and management program, and a recreation program. And so where we are tonight is in that habitat restoration and management program, we identified these conservation reach studies that you can see here that are highlighted with this red box. So this was just one of many recommendations that came out of this. There were 8 conservation reaches that were identified as part of this study. And the idea was, the Lower Mississippi River is 954 river miles. That's a lot. How can we break that into more manageable chunks? And so we basically took the river and looking at historical maps and kind of knowing what the river, how it used to run, we're able to identify that these are about 40-mile reaches of the river that have a nice variety of habitats that really showcase the heterogeneity of habitats that are out there on the Lower Miss, but also recognizing that there's some improvements that we can continue to make for our fish and wildlife resources and for people to get out and actually enjoy and recreate on the river. So we started this study in, we had authorization for it in Water Resources Development Act of 2018. We actually had funding at the start of, I guess it was the end of fiscal year 21. So in July of last year, we signed a cost share agreement with the Memphis District Corps. And this is going through their 3x3x3 planning process. And we are focusing on this reach here that's circled in blue. This is the Hatchie-Loosahatchie reach. These other yellow dots that you can see on here are the other conservation reaches that have been identified. So Mike is from the Corps is going to give you more information and kind of specifics about the study itself and some of the measures that have been identified. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of provide you that background and just to let you know that the LMRCC is going to continue doing the on-the-ground restoration work that we have been doing for a number of years now. But we're really excited to have this opportunity to look comprehensively at restoration and more holistically in our approaches to it. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Angie. I appreciate it. So again, my name is Mike Throne. I'm the project biologist and National Environmental Policy Act coordinator for this study. I'm going to give you a quick background and a little introductory information on the study area, and then we'll get into some of the specific measures we're talking about, some of these opportunities that we've identified, and would love to get your feedback on today. So the purpose of this scoping meeting, the whole reason we're here, so public scoping is a process laid out in the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. That's the basic national charter for environmental protection. And really, the purpose is twofold. One, it's to solicit, to inform the public. So that's to provide this overview of our study and where we're at in our process. And then secondly, we want to solicit input. So that's what today's really is all about, is getting feedback from you all today. So some of the overall goals we're hoping to do with that input is to determine the scope of significant issues and concerns. And then that'll allow us to eliminate those that aren't significant, get your feedback on that. for a more condensed study, as well as the development of alternatives. So we've got some, what we feel are some good opportunities for ecosystem restoration out there. But at this point, that's all they are just opportunities. And we can't do anything out there on the landscape without partnerships from landowners, resource agencies, and the public at large. So we really hope to hear from you today. So this is just a quick agenda of what I'll be covering, a little background on our study, explain where all our study area entails, and then go through some of these specific measures that we've got proposed. And then leave enough time to hear from you all. So I'm going to give you some example measures of things we've come up with our interagency team. And then after I conclude my presentation, we've got maps of more with some more detail on a lot of these measures. And if there's a specific area you're interested in, we just encourage you to walk around, find that location on the map, give us some site-specific feedback, and provide any information you feel like. So you saw this slide earlier. This is what Angie presented. So this study stems from that background Lower Mississippi River Resource Assessment, or LMRA study that was concluded in 2012. So you'll see this is part of that study. So it identified those 3 sets of recommendations. This study is the first time the Corps of Engineers is really getting into large-scale ecosystem restoration out here on this part of the river, so we're really excited about that. It's the first conservation reach out of those 8 priority reaches that are shown up there. So this being the first study of hopefully many more, shows how anxious we are to really get feedback from the public and hear kind of what we've got proposed today. This slide here shows you the authorization for the study. So it was authorized in the Water Resource Development Act of 2018, or WRD of 2018. She mentioned we received funding in 2021, back last July, and that's what we've been doing, working on ever since, is working on this study, getting specifics completed. So our study area, it's the 39-mile reach of the Lower Mississippi River. It begins essentially where the Hatchie River comes in around River Mile 775, and it extends all the way down to around the city of Memphis there at River Mile 736. So there's 3 main tributary mouths in our reach. You got the Hatchie River, the Loosathatchie River, and the Wolf River, and then we've got several public lands where we are today, Meeman Shelby Forest State Park. You've got the Eagle Lake State Refuge Wildlife Management Area, so it's just below Meeman Shelby Forest State Park here, and then we also have the Lower Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge, which is here where the Hatchie River enters the Mississippi River. So, in order to describe the problems and opportunities, I've got this real complex diagram up here. So this diagram is what's called a conceptual ecological model, and this is what was developed during that preceding report, the LMRA report, where a lot of the experts came and put their heads together and explained how the system works out here. And this just kind of exemplifies how interconnected everything is out here in our study area. So our study area is bordered by the levees along the east bank, or the west bank, on the Arkansas side, if you will, and then the high bluffs on the east bank on the Tennessee side. So it's really the active floodplain out there on the main channel of the Mississippi River and the active floodplain on this reach of the river. And that first blue box you see up there, the flood risk management system. So obviously the levees have constrained where that active floodplain is. So the river's not allowed to flood the alluvial valley anymore like it used to. And with the advent of the levee system, you have shrunk your forested areas. It's really transformed this area from what was historically forest into an agricultural area. But with that, your forest has disappeared. So the remaining forest we have out here is extremely valuable, right? So it's kind of the floodplain habitat we have left. The study area, it's about within the batcher or the floodplain. There's about 40% is in agricultural production still, and about 40% is forested. So there is some opportunities there if there's non-productive ag land that people would be interested into reestablishing that native forest community, and that would obviously be an opportunity for us to address with this study. So in terms of the channel improvement program, so that's another, the channel improvement program, that's another system that has had some effects in our area. So obviously the river, we have maintained this navigation channel on the Mississippi River with that channel improvement program. So what that's essentially done is locked the river mostly in place. So it doesn't meander across the alluvial valley anymore. A lot of our habitats that are out there, that have been out there historically, they're not getting created like they're used to. So these old, you can see here, this is the old state line here. It's where the river channel used to go. But since the river has cut itself off and we maintain it out here, that flowing water is not connected as much as it used to be. Additionally, you're not getting new meander. We call these meander scarps. We're not getting these old meanders created anymore. So those ones that we have out there, especially ones that are still flowing, are even more valuable for us, just because they're not getting created and they're scarce out there. When you think about land use out there, so within our study area, a lot of the forest, the remaining forest that's out there, it's valuable. You know, it's the remaining floodplain forest that we have out there now. However, there has been past forestry operations and things that have taken a lot of the mass production out. So we're talking like the oak species, those species that produce acorns and things wildlife uses. A lot of those hard mass species have been historically logged out over time, and that community composition doesn't show those valuable species as much out there in the landscape. So we do have some opportunity to restore some of those native forests. When you talk about climate change, so we mentioned these meander scarps becoming less connected over time. As they become less connected, a lot of these floodplain water bodies, they'll start to fill in with sediment when the river doesn't go through them as often. And with climate change, we're seeing longer droughts in the summer, and that's that low flow period that can stress fish and other aquatic organisms out. So when your water drops out during the summer, if you have a long drought, the oxygen levels drop, and you have fish kills and other stressors for the aquatic environment. So this slide here, this kind of shows you how our study development has progressed. So when we first started out, Ed mentioned our scoping meeting we had last October. So we really were kind of at our initial stages during that time. We had a lot of conceptual ideas, but we didn't have measures put on a map. When we started trying to place measures on the map, that's when we realized it's really hard to identify something with that at the scale we're looking at the entire study area. So what we did is we compiled a lot of information using ArcGIS online from the Corps of Engineers and from our partners, our interagency partners, and we've got things like soils data from the National Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. We've got historic maps that the Corps of Engineers had of where the river used to be and how it's evolved over time. We've got elevation data that's really shown, what areas are still low-lying, which ones are ripe for different types of restoration opportunities. We've got things that have been identified from other agencies. So we've got forest breeding bird priority areas that the Lower Mississippi Valley Joint Venture has already identified. So we laid those on top of our study area as well. Fish and Wildlife Service has alligator gar spawning areas, some prime spawning areas for them identified. So these are all things we laid out on the map. And we've come up with about a little over 90 measures. That's what you're seeing, all these little dots along this map here. So we've got part of that process of identifying those measures was breaking up our study area. So we used all this information to break our study area up into 11 geographic complexes. We've got maps around the room of each of those complexes, and we've got our proposed measures identified on those maps, and that's what we really wanted to get some good site-specific feedback from you all today. So we're going to leave enough time after this presentation to open it up for you all to go around and look at these maps, where they're at on the landscape, and give us some good site-specific feedback. So our overall goals and objectives. Some of this was shown last October at the last scoping meeting. But this, I'm just going to kind of review that. Our overall goal is really to restore the ecological structure and function to the whole mosaic of habitats. So we're not just focusing on the vegetation. We're not just focusing on the aquatics. We're focused on them all. We would like to do improve things for wildlife species, vegetative species, the fish that spawn out on the floodplain, the fish that obligate riverine species that need the permanently flowing water, the whole suite of habitats we have out there is really what the overall goal is. We broke the study up into 4 main objectives to focus our efforts. So the first objective really focuses on those vegetative habitats. So there's a variety of vegetative habitats we've been looking into to help promote that diversity. We've got habitats, a lot of your seasonal herbaceous wetlands, your emergent vegetation, things the areas that are low enough where woody vegetation doesn't grow, but those wetland species do. We'd already talked about the forest community and the fewer oak species that are present out there, so we do have some opportunities to bring some of that mass production back in the existing forest. There's vegetative communities like river cane, so the literature suggests that's been reduced up to 98% of what it was historically. So you read reports of the cane breaks that used to have miles and miles of river cane out there. You don't really see that anymore. There is some present in the understory and some of the existing forests out there, so looking at ways to promote some of that vegetation is one of our objectives. The second objective really focuses on large river habitats. So that's those main channel habitats. That's those obligate riverine species that use flowing water, that use the gravel bars, all those habitats you find out there connected to the main channel. Our third objective focuses more into the floodplain water bodies. So as you extend out into the floodplain, it's really trying to bring some of that connectivity back to those floodplain water bodies that have been disconnected. Since they have filled in over time, we're looking at deepening them, bringing it back some habitat complexity for that. And then finally, our fourth objective is focused on recreational opportunities and access to public spaces in the study area. So that was one of the main things that was identified during the LMRA report. There was a whole series of recommendations on recreation. The Corps of Engineers Ecosystem Restoration Authority doesn't allow us to formulate specifically for recreation, but bringing public access to our features is one of those opportunities that we can do. So we're talking things like primitive access, small boat ramps. We can't establish marinas or any commercial type of operation, but really bring in some trails, parking lots, smaller type of recreational features are compatible with our ecosystem restoration policy. So this gives some examples of what we're talking about with that first objective. So some of our vegetative measures, we talked about different types of forest, cypress tupelo. So that's the vegetative community that likes it's the forested community that really is prevalent in these real low-lying areas. So I've got a picture over here, an elevation photograph, an aerial photograph with its corresponding elevation data. So this area here is a really low-lying area adjacent to the river that has the right soils and the right elevation to sustain cypress tupelo swamps, one of our rare community types. So that's in our Richardson Cedar Point complex. So this is one example of an area that seems ripe for cypress tupelo restoration. We've talked about bringing back the hard mass species in our existing forests out there, as well as river cane. So this picture here, this is a photograph from Brandywine Island. That's Dr. Bruce Pruitt, one of our researchers out there. He's got some gauges out there measuring the existing river cane that's in the understory out there, looking at really what that prime hydrology is for river cane to see if we can promote some of that vegetative community type. And then we talked about seasonal herbaceous wetlands and riparian buffers. So areas along the Mississippi River, when you talk about riparian buffers, where you don't have the forest adjacent to the Mississippi River channel, so not only does that area erode as the river gets out of bank, some of your species like eagles and things that nest along the river would be able to utilize those riparian buffers as well, in addition to the benefits to water quality that riparian buffers provide. So this next set of examples focuses on that second objective. That's those obligate riverine species. This is our large river objective. Angie talked about dike notching pretty extensively, so I'm not going to go too in-depth with this, but this example here is from our Island 35 Dean's Island complex. So you'll see on this lower end of that complex, you'll see this secondary channel that's connected both at the top and at the bottom to the main channel of the Mississippi River. We have a series of old pile dikes that were constructed in this secondary channel when we were first establishing, when the channel improvement program was first establishing this new channel alignment, or what was the new channel alignment. It's probably been 100 years ago since that was constructed, or give or take. But these old pile dikes aren't really functioning. They don't have a channel improvement function anymore. So we're proposing to go in and notch those dikes, just like Angie had mentioned. Here's a picture of one during low water. So you can see, even though it's just a really old dike, it still is collecting sediment behind it. So putting a notch in there would allow that low flow channel to be maintained throughout the year, helping those large river species that need that flow. So this next example has to do with our third objective, where we're looking at increasing connectivity to these floodplain water bodies out on the floodplain. So this is our Sunrise Island 34 complex. And you can see this is that old meander. It's called, we're calling it a meander scarp, where the main channel used to come all the way around in that direction there. So since that time, the river has established this new alignment over here, but that secondary channel is still present and it's still flowing. It's just starting to fill in over time. So this is a picture of what happens during low water. This is the mouth of Sunrise Island, so that picture is right here. We floated by there this past summer and during low water times, and you can see a lot of these, all these little fish that you're seeing here are dead fish that have succumbed from low oxygen, and they were just scattered around the whole mouth of the island there as water had dropped out. So what we're proposing to do, you can see here, our first measure is proposing to install a river training structure that will help divert water into that meander scarp. We also can remove accumulated sediment like you see here. This sediment plug, it's listed as 4C, so this is where sediment has accrued into the system. So establishing that low flow channel through this sediment, instead you can bring a small dredge in or establish a low flow channel through that plug to maintain that flow. This section here, there's an old pile dike that exists on the lower end of this secondary channel as well. So notching that, getting a real big notch in that dike will help maintain that flow. And then there's also a bridge that goes across there, and you can see all of the debris that's accumulated behind that bridge. So one of the proposed measures or items is lowering the invert elevation of that bridge to help maintain flow throughout that meander scarp. So this example measure is all about bringing some habitat complexity back to these floodplain lakes. It's floodplain lake restoration. This example is from our Hopefield Point Big River Park complex. So this is at the very southern end, at the very downstream end of our study area, straight across from the city of Memphis. And I want to point out, you can see here, this is the mainline levee that you see on the side of this diagram here. You've got I-40 that goes across the river on the north end, and you've got I-55 that goes across the river on the south end of this complex. So all of those features, the levees and the interstate system, required borrow areas to construct. So we've got these old borrow areas or borrow pits that function just like your floodplain lakes out there on the floodplain, but they've started to fill in over time. So what we're proposing to do is go in and bring back some of that complexity to them. This is a picture of us sampling one of those borrow pits a couple years ago, so you can see how much has filled in over time, so they're typically built to 8 to 10 feet in depth. That's us standing on the bottom of it in the middle of the borrow pit. You know, it's shallow as 3 to 4 feet. So this diagram here just kind of shows you some of our proposed measures going through, bringing that depth back, pushing the material around, creating an island, making a sinuous shoreline, maintaining a vegetative buffer around the end, around the outside of it, so you get that shading and that cool water necessary for good, healthy fish and wildlife out there, fish and wildlife system. All right, so the next measure is also related to that floodplain water body objective, that third objective we got. And this one's at our Hatchie Towhead Randolph complex at the upstream end of our study area. And what this one is proposing to do, this is the Hatchie River coming into the Mississippi River. So as you make your way up the Hatchie River, we've got these two dots you'll see right here. So that's what you're seeing on the left-hand side here. We've got two obstructions that were identified using our elevation data. It looks like they're culverts. So things like lowering the inverts of that culvert will help increase that connectivity to this floodplain water body that you see in blue here. And this one's fairly unique in that it's not just increasing connectivity to that floodplain water body, but you also have a low-lying elevation field immediately adjacent to it. And you can see here, this is a graph showing the elevation of that field on a typical water year. This is from 2017. It's kind of an average water year, and you can see that that field's inundated for over 30 days in the spring. And why that's important is that's the time when fish, a lot of your floodplain spawners go out and spawn on the floodplain. So this area specifically, we mentioned U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service earlier had identified some priority areas for alligator gar spawning. So this beautiful fish, some people would call it ugly, but most fisheries biologists call it beautiful. So this is an alligator gar, and why alligator gar are important? So they're one of the few predators out there for the invasive carp that are prevalent on the Mississippi River now. And promoting these native species, this native predator, is one of the main strategies identified during in a recent publication that the Lower Mississippi River Basin Invasive Carp Control Strategy Framework. So it's one of those strategies that's been identified specifically promoting habitat for alligator gar and specifically spawning habitat for alligator gar in this area. So we mentioned the Fish and Wildlife Service identified those areas. So what you're seeing here in pink and red are those prime spawning areas that they've identified. So alligator gar kind of need three things for successful spawning. So they need access to the river, which we have, which we're proposing to increase by lowering those inverts, those culverts. They need a staging area. So as they come in off of the river, they need a floodplain water body to set up and stage before they spawn. So increasing connectivity to that floodplain water body we talked about would allow for that staging area. And then as the water backs up onto that low-lying field, they need that area to spawn, and they need that water temperature to increase as the water sits on that field for that approximately 30 days. Alligator gar are somewhat unique in that they don't use forested environments to spawn. They mostly use non-forested environments. So wetland habitat, these old fields, even agriculture areas where they leave stubble and things can be used. Their eggs adhere to that vegetation and hatches out and allows them to mature enough to have a successful spawn and make their way back into the river. So that concludes our examples today. But for the rest of the presentation, we really want to hear from you all. So I've got a series of questions here to help kind of spur your thoughts and hopefully to get some comments back from you today. These questions here are on the back of the handouts that you received as you walked in the room. If you'd like to provide written comments to us, you can just rip off the back page of that handout, fill out this comment card, and leave them with us. If you'd want to think about it, you can take it back and email them to us. And we've got a contact card that will show in a second that where that information goes. But the types of information we're really looking for, so those problems and opportunities that we described today, do those make sense to you? Would those improve the ecological functions that you've seen out here in our study area? Are there any other concerns or issues you want us to know about? Are there additional measures that we haven't talked about today, or that you don't see around the room today that you want us to know about? Please send those to us. Any specific data or modeling needs or reports that are out there that we may not be aware of, please share those with us. Specific locations or unique opportunities for consideration. So the landowners obviously know the ins and outs, the site-specific lay of the land, much better than anyone here. So please provide any information that you would like us to know. If there's areas ripe for ecosystem restoration that you know about, please point those out to us. And then we also have a question here regarding real estate. So if there is land that you know about that you would like to sell for ecosystem restoration, that's what we have here is fee simple, is just that essentially that's selling the land. Or if that doesn't make sense to you, something like easements would make more sense. We'd like to hear from you, hear about that from you as well. So we want to get that feedback. All we have right now are just opportunities out there on the landscape. Nothing can be done without partnering with the landowner, without partnering with the agencies. So if you're interested, please come talk to us. Let us know what makes sense to you, and hopefully we can get some good ecosystem restoration projects on the ground. And then finally, any additional comments. So anything you'd like to provide to us, there's plenty of space on the comment cards, or you can send them to this email link here. We've got a project website that has all this information on it. This presentation will be posted on there. All our maps are posted on there. Or you can mail it to the mailing address at the Corps of Engineers here. So when are comments due? So our public scoping is going to be open for 30 days from when we publish our notice of intent in the Federal Register. So a notice of intent is a step in the NEPA process when the federal government starts what's known as an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for one of their studies. They publish this notice of intent into the Federal Register, which describes the scoping process, and our scoping comment period is going to extend for 30 days from when that's published. We expect that to happen in the next 2 weeks, so that puts the end of our comment period around the end of October. But we'll be sending out notifications for when that notice of intent gets published. We'll be sending out news releases, post it on the website, send it out to our distribution list for you all to see. So I want to again thank you for coming. Encourage you to provide us feedback. That's what this process is all about. And we'll leave it at that. I'll take any questions if we have any, or if not, we'll lay these maps out and look forward to getting some site-specific feedback from you. Thanks.